Good day, everyone. This is 30 Minute Theology. I am Olu Ashako, and we are going to dive into the book of Judges, chapter 7 today. And the thought is flashlights and flower pots. I know you're like, what does that have to do with things? Just stick with me, and you'll see sooner than later. If you can, please like, subscribe, and share, and let us begin. So Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Herod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Morah. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore, tell the people whoever's timid or afraid may leave this mountain and go home." So 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who were willing to fight. A couple things about this portion of the lesson. Often we see that those who've had encounters with God get a new name. I think of Jacob getting the name of Israel. Then also Simon getting the name Peter as well because of his interactions with God. And in this situation with Gideon, he got the name Jerubbaal, and it stuck. That's what he was being called because his father said, "Let Baal fight for himself." So then that kind of became his name. Uh, a really important piece of that, this part of the lesson, or a really important lesson that we can learn from this experience, is that we should be changed when we're in the presence of God. We shouldn't come out the same when we're in the presence of God. And for him, he got a new name. Now, they were told by the Lord to go down from where they were camping. They were in Mount Morah, and told them to go down to Herod, which is actually the spring of Herod. If you can see on the image, there's a little blue line behind that red dot. That's the spring of Herod, and you can see it's not too far from Jezreel, which is where Gideon called the troops together in the first place. Then they went up into the mountains and came down to Herod. Let's continue. But the Lord told Gideon, "There's still too many. Bring them down to the spring, and I will test them to determine who will go with you and who will not." When Gideon took the warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, "Divide the men into two groups. In one group, put all those who cup water in their hands and lap it with their tongue like dogs. In the other group, all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream." Only 300 of the men drank from their hands. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. So, just going back a little bit to the previous slide, they had 32,000 people, and they got cut down to 10,000 because there were too many people. As God said, they were going to get the big head and think it was all about them, when it wasn't. So over two-thirds of the people admitted, "You know what, I'm afraid. I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to do it." But I applaud them for saying as much. They were scared, but they were prepared to fight. They were coming out. It could have been peer pressure, it could have been a sense of duty, but they were called and they went, and that's commendable. It's also brave for them to say, "This is too much for me. I am scared and I don't want to go." And they had precedence for this. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 8, the officers shall add, "Is anyone afraid or faint hearted? Let him go home, so that his fellow soldier will not become disheartened too." So it was already there in the scriptures, in the writings, that scared people don't need to be on the battlefield. It also lists, hey, if you just built a new house, or you got a new vineyard, or you just got married, then don't come out and fight. And it was important to know state of the heart of the men, because their ancestors wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years because they were too scared to go fight. So fear is infectious. And if you've got some people who are afraid, it can impact others who are not afraid and cause them to fall and make everything fall apart. So again, I commend them for that. But the Lord was like, it's still too many. With the 10,000, it's too many. So he had to cut them down again. What was the significance of them drinking from their hands? It was a sign that they were aware of their surroundings and that they had war on their minds. If you're bent down with your head in the water and it's time to fight someone, pops up out of nowhere, you are totally caught off guard. Whereas not only did they cup the water with their hands, but then they lapped it like a dog. If they took the water and drank it all the way, then they're still not ready to fight because they can't see. But they kept themselves ready at all times. And it takes a special kind of person to have that kind of awareness and to be ready, which is the reason why less than 1% of the 32,000, um, and even, or I should say a little bit more than that, about 3% of the 10,000 that were left, with less than 1% of the 32,000 had that mindset, and that's why the Lord chose them. All right, let's keep going. The Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you the victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home. So Gideon collected the provisions and the ram's horns of the other warriors and sent them home. But he kept the 300 men with him. The Midianites' camp was in the valley just below Gideon. That night the Lord said, get up, go down into the Midianite camp, for I have given you victory over them. But if you're afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah. This is just so lovely and so wonderful to me, because the Lord knows us. He knows us intimately. And he knew who he was dealing with in Gideon, the same one that when he spoke to him in the theophany as the angel, uh, he went forward and gathered the men, but they had to have counted two proofs that God was saying to go fight. He was like, look, go do it now, but I know you get in, so you need some proof. Go down there, and when you go down there, you'll be ready to fight after it. Which is a reminder of our lesson last week, which was do it afraid. He did it afraid. He still pushed through, and even though he was a little concerned, that's where he needed to go to get the courage necessary to push forward with what God said. Key point here is that sometimes our peace is found when we enter the most dangerous situation. Sometimes it's in the heart of danger, in that difficult place. Oftentimes when it comes to the things of God, they're not easy things. They're not comfortable things. If they were, then we would not have any problems doing it. Many times there are things that are stretching us, things that seem to be dangerous for us, things that put our lives or our name or our livelihoods in peril. But when you are following God, no matter how dangerous that situation is, it's the best thing for you. And often that's what we need, is to get out of that comfort zone in order to grow. So just because it seems a little dangerous or it seems a bit risky, don't think that that doesn't mean that God isn't leading you there. If he said it, he will prove his word, as he did with Gideon a number of times, and as he is about to in the next couple of verses. So let's go there. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be greatly encouraged. Then you'll be eager to attack. So Gideon took Purah and went down to the edge of the enemy camp. The armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east had settled in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were like grains of sand on the seashore, too many to count. Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, I had this dream, and in my dream, a loaf of barley bread came tumbling down into the Midianite camp. It hit a tent and turned it over and knocked it flat. When I was studying this, one of the things that piqued my interest was the type of bread that was stated, a barley loaf. Why a barley loaf? What does that represent? Well, barley and barley loaves specifically is poor man's food, and it represents humility. That little loaf, the 300 men that they had, and then Israel at that time was poor, and they continue to be poor because of the oppression of the Midianites, taking everything that they had and leaving them with little or nothing, and really forcing them into starvation, which is one of the reasons why Israel cried out to the Lord so soon after the oppression. It was like 7 years, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say when they cried out to the Lord and He gave them Othniel, it had been about 8 years. So either way it goes, it was one of the shortest periods of time that it took them to repent and to turn back to God. So they were poor in their resources, and the force was very poor. That 300 was going to topple a force that was so great that the camels couldn't be numbered. Another thing that is interesting about or notable about barley is that when Jesus fed the multitudes, when he fed with the two fish and the five loaves, those loaves were thought to be barley loaves. And it's for us, it's a little deceiving to call them loaves. They're like biscuits, so like just little biscuits. You think about it. If it's a lunch for a little child, they can't eat a full loaf of bread, much less would a parent send five of them with them. So just little biscuits. Also, barley was the first grain that they would be able to harvest. The barley harvest happened in the springtime. There was a feast that went along with this called the Feast of the First Fruits. That was held, or I should say, it's held the day after Passover. Also, Jesus is called the first fruit of the dead. You find that in First Corinthians chapter 15:20. When was he killed? He was killed the day after the Passover, which was the feast of the first fruits. What are the first fruits? Barley. What is barley? Poor man's bread. Jesus was humble. He was born in a barn. He was from the hood, place where they say, "Oh, nothing good comes from over there." But this is where Jesus comes from. He owned no home. He was couch surfing before it was a thing. He had an account that the thief Judas was over, but even in that account, it was funny. They had to go fishing one time to catch a fish that had a gold piece in his mouth to pay taxes because they didn't have money. Yet he was the king, very humble, coming meek and mild, representing humility. This is who Jesus is. And again, how the Lord has a way of tying everything back to himself. The Old Testament speaks of and prophesies of Jesus, where the New Testament speaks directly of him and his actions and the promises and directions that he's given to the church after his coming. The loaf was also round, and that represented completeness. Let us continue. His companion answered, Your dream can mean only one thing. God has given this Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all its allies. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship before the Lord. Then he returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, Get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes. He divided the 300 men into three groups and gave each man a ram's horn and a clay jar with a torch in it. Then he said to them, Keep your eyes on me. When I come to the edge of the camp, do just as I do. That whole keep your eyes on me makes me think of two things. One, it makes me think of being in a choir and the choir director, watch me, watch, watch, watch. I also wonder, speaking of music and that turn, if this is where Tupac got all eyes on me. But I digress. Let's get back to what this is saying specifically. Um, and the thing that I really want to focus on is Gideon's response to that prophetic dream. What did he do? He bowed and he worshiped when he heard the dream and the interpretation thereof. Now, it doesn't say specifically that he was in the enemy's camp, but we know that he wasn't in the Israelite camp because after he bowed and worshiped, he then went to his camp. So the fact that he's worshiping in a place that, again, is dangerous, a place that, and an action that, or I should say, a place that's dangerous, it's not safe, and an action that could bring attention to him and cause him to lose his life, he still did it. He bowed and he worshiped after hearing what God said. This shows that his faith was strengthened. And it also shows how he's grown as far as his faith was concerned. He had to have the fleece wet and then the fleece dry before. Now he's in the enemy's camp, or at least not in his camp, in a place that's dangerous, worshiping God. He's like, if I bring attention to myself, it doesn't matter. God has proven that we have the victory. He told me to come down and that I would know that it was time to go forward. My faith will be strengthened. It is strengthened. I'm ready to go. And because I'm ready to go, let me worship my God. Ooh, it's just so refreshing to see this, and it's so helpful to know that our response to God's word should be worship. He went back, called the Israelites and said, come on, God has given you the victory, so let's go. Didn't say God has given me the victory or us the victory. He made it personal. God has given you the victory, so let us go and fight against the Midianites. All right, verse 18. As soon as I and those with me blow the horns, blow your horns too, all around the entire camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. It was just after midnight, after the changing of the guard, when Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the Midianite camp. Suddenly they blew the ram's horn and broke their clay jars. Then all three groups of men blew their horns and broke their jars. They held the blazing torches in their left hands and the horns in their right hands. And they all shouted, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. Each man stood at his position around the camp and watched as the Midianites rushed around in a panic, shouting as they ran to escape. Okay, so they cried out for the Lord and for Gideon. For the Lord, I get that because he's God. And they are there specifically directed by him to wage war against Midian and Amalek, which again, Midian were the descendants of Abraham and his second wife, Keturah. Amalek were the descendants of Esau, so another family member, and the people from the east were the Kedemites, which were descendants of children that Abraham had with one of his concubines. So again, I understand why for the Lord, but why for Gideon? Is it that Gideon was inserting himself into the conversation? Is it that, oh, now Lord has said it. I'm feeling good, about myself. Let me say something. I believe more so that it was because of the prophetic dream that the enemies had. They said that this can't mean anything but that God has given victory to Gideon. Uh, and in that, they discussed the fact that it was the sword of Gideon. So God gave them victory through Gideon. Sometimes God uses us as an entry point so that we can go where the enemy is and destroy the enemy. Keep in mind that whatever it is that we do, whatever task is at hand, even our next breath, if God does not give us the strength and the ability to do it, we can't do it. So, no matter what it is that we do and that we're doing for God, we're only able to do that because He gives us the ability. Verse 22. When the Israelites, or I should say, when the 300 Israelites blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight against each other with their swords. Those who were not killed fled to places as far away as Bethsheba near Zerah and to the border of Abel Meholah near Tabith. When Gideon sent, I'm sorry, then Gideon sent for the warriors of Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, who joined in chasing the army of Midian. So, again, because of Israel's obedience in playing the horn, and this is where, again, or I should say, the previous slide is where flashlights and flower pots come in. The flashlight being the torches, the flower pots being the clay jars that those torches were in. By them being obedient, playing the horn, breaking those clay pots, holding the light up, the Lord caused the enemy to turn on themselves versus fighting the Israelites. We have to remember, it's about midnight. So the darkest portion of the day. That's when the Lord moved, which makes me think of Fred Hammond late in the midnight hour. God's going to turn it around. And literally, it was midnight when they attacked and when God turned things around for them. But, think about it. It's dark. This is way, way back in the day. So there's no electric lights anywhere. They are three different nations that are together fighting against Israel. They don't know everybody, so it makes sense as to why, in their panic, they may kill people who actually were there to fight with them because they don't know what to do. One thing that's very important about this is you don't need a great amount of physical resources per se to do what God has said do. You need faith in Him. If He said to do it, no matter what you have, because God told Gideon, you're a mighty man of God. Go in the strength that I've given you and do this. What was Gideon's strength? His strength was believing God. Another part of this that is so comforting for me is that, yes, Gideon had faith in God. Yes, Gideon did what he said. Yes, Gideon did it afraid even. It didn't change the fact that there was still some uncertainty that Gideon dealt with. And that, again, is really comforting for me because as God says stuff, sometimes it's like, I hear this, but, God, are you really saying this? Is this, what I'm supposed to do? One, the Lord does not is not bothered by our questions. He doesn't mind if we say, hey, can you, let me know. I want to know that I know that this is God speaking to me and that He's directing me. Time after time, He proved Himself. And even before Gideon could ask Him to prove Himself again, the Lord gave him what he needed in the direction that he needed so he could get the proof. God doesn't mind us trying the Spirit by the Spirit, and testing and proving that He's saying what He's saying. No problem with giving us reminders, or I should say, confirmation regarding His word. Once they were on the run, being Midian and Amalek and the people of the east, Gideon then called for reinforcements. So though it started with the 300, it wasn't just the 300 that did it. Some of those 3,200, or I should say, some of the total of 3,200 that were there initially probably joined back in the battle once Gideon sent word that, hey, we got them on the run. Help us finish them off. Again, it started with that 300, but it included more. That doesn't detract from the glory that guy got out of the situation, because still you got so many people, 135,000 people, which we'll get that number in future lessons. But 133,000 people fled from 300. How does that happen? Flashlights and flower pots. What do flashlights and flower pots have anything to do with it? It's all about faith in God. That's how these things came about. It was because of the work of the Lord, believing that He would do it, no matter how crazy it looked, them going forth, moving in faith, and then God doing what He does best, and just showing out and getting the glory for giving victory, which is why He had to keep paring down the number so there'd be no doubt that it was God who did it. All right, last two verses. Gideon also sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down to attack the Midianites, cut them off at the shallow crossings of the Jordan River at Beth Bera." So all the men of Ephraim did as they were told. They captured Oreb and Zeb, two of the Midianite commanders, killing Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. And they continued to chase the Midianites. Afterward, the Israelites brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the river Jordan. It's thought that the rock of Oreb and the winepress of Zeb were named after these two individuals in commemoration of the victory that God gave Ephraim in these places. Don't forget, and we'll dive into this a bit more in the next lesson. Ephraim, as a tribe, they were about their life. So, whatever euphemism you want to use, you want to go back in the day and say they were goons or monsters, okay. You want to say in today that they were steppers or hitters, whatever euphemism you want to use. Ephraim was about their life. They were warriors. They had no problems taking out the enemy. And in doing so, they brought back that proof to Gideon by taking off their heads. Didn't use a guillotine because they were on the battlefield, and the guillotine wasn't invented until, you know, decades or millennia later. But they did take their heads as proof. All right. In conclusion, a couple key points to remember as we go. Whenever you're in the presence of God, look to be changed. It's not just about feeling good and things of that nature. When you're in God's presence, we should look for a change. Our response to God's instruction, to His confirmation, should be worship. When God speaks, we should worship Him because He doesn't have to do that. And when He does speak to us, that's what really gives us life, and it gives us direction. Everything was created by His word. So when He's speaking to us, He's creating things in us, and that should cause us to worship. Sometimes we got to go to the hard and the dangerous places, the heart of danger, in order to find peace. Peace is not found in the easy things. Peace is not found on the outside, but often we've got to go right into the heart of the thing that we fear the most in order to find peace. Last but not least, God will add extra to our ordinary to bring about the results that He desires. All right, next week that we get together, we'll be going over chapter 8 of not Joshua, of Judges. And the title for that lesson is, that's interesting. Until then, God bless and keep it together.